Hey everybody, Nathan Elson here. Welcome back to another episode of How I Got the Shot. Now this is the type of image that we're going to be creating today. Let's just get into it. So here we are in studio, and this is a fairly straightforward two-light setup where we are essentially turning the white backdrop into our main source of light for the portrait. Now to do this, I'm using two Godox 8600 Pro heads with medium-sized deep Pro Photo umbrellas attached. Each light is powered at about half power, which is metering at about f11. Now the model is roughly 4 to 5 feet away from the backdrop, and the only thing you really have to watch with this kind of setup is your light placement. Again, we are essentially turning the backdrop into a giant source of light, so you'll have to make sure that your modifiers are not spilling light directly onto your subject and that they're only throwing light directly onto the backdrop. By doing this, you create a nice, soft, even throw of bounced light. You also want to make sure that your model is positioned at the crest of where the light starts to fall off so that you get a nicer transition from the highlights to the shadows. If your subject is too far away from that crest, you will lose a lot of the highlights that make the portrait interesting, and the image will start to flatten out. And if they're too deep into that crest, as in being too close to the backdrop, the lighting becomes harsher and you lose the beautiful transition from light to shadow. A little bit later in the video, I'll show you exactly what I mean by this. Now, based on the distance of the model to the backdrop, the exposure on the model is f5.6 at 1/200th of a second at ISO 100. So of course, this is what my camera settings will be. This allows for the backdrop to be pure white as it's metered to f11, so it's 2 full stops brighter than the subject. Because the model is laying on a white surface, we are also getting a natural fill light, which is keeping lots of detail and giving us a really nice transition from the highlights to the shadows. Now, if any of this isn't making sense to you, I've done an entire video on how to meter lighting, which I'll link above as well as at the end of this video. Now for my camera, I'm using the Nikon D800 with the Sigma 85mm f1.4 art lens attached, and I'm shooting into Capture One Pro on a Dell XPS 15 laptop. Now let's head into Capture One and I'll show you how to process these images. Okay, so here we are in Capture One, and I just wanted to show you guys really quick what I meant about the model being on that crest of light. So as you can see here, we've got these really beautiful transitions from light to shadow, different poses, all giving kind of that same beautiful quality of light. But if we move the model too far away from that crest of light, we end up with this, where you still get some of that highlight and shadow, but you're not getting that beautiful transition of light where the modifier, and essentially that's what we're doing, is turning this backdrop into a modifier. We're not getting the full output and the full quality of light from the modifier. So it's just like if you were using a softbox or something like that. If you move your subject too far away from that modifier, you start losing its light shaping characteristics. So in terms of this, when it comes to using the backdrop as the modifier by blasting light into it and allowing that light to bounce back, what we're doing is we need to position that model in the proper position to properly take in that quality of light. So I just wanted to show you guys that real quick and give you a quick example of what it looks like if you're not positioned properly to when you are. Now again, I show a lot more of these images on my Instagram than I do in these videos. So if you do want to see more edits from this, follow me on Instagram, check me out there. That's where you'll find the majority of my work. But I think this is the image here that we're going to edit for this one. I'll just take you guys through some of the quick things that I do to clean this up, to color grade it and get it ready for final. So the first thing that we're going to do here is I'm going to take out my healing brush and I'm just going to paint this in. And that gets rid of these blank spots that we couldn't fit into our frame, or were too small for the frame to fit in. And that gets rid of that real quick, as you can see here, if we turn that off and on. Super easy, nice and clean. And then what we're going to do here is I'm just going to add a little bit of a grade. So I'm going to create another layer here, and I'm going to select my gradients here, and I'm going to bring this up. Just position that in a little bit. And all I'm doing is just adding a little bit more light into this area of the image just to balance it out a touch. Nice. And that looks great like that. So if you see this here, if you go on and off, it opens it up a little bit, just makes it a little less dark on the transition out of light. So now if we move back into our background, if I turn on my highlight mask here, you can see that the backdrop and everything like that, it's all blown out, which is exactly what we want. We want that pure white, but on the model, none of those details are really being lost. There's a little bit of harsh highlights in the eye or the forehead, things like that, but for the most part, nothing that you would really see. So one of the main things when you're metering for this type of light as well is you really want to make sure that you're not losing your model in that light, that you're keeping these areas that are in sort of the upper crest of the lighting properly exposed. So from here, I'm going to convert this to black and white. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and enable my black and white. And there's not a lot of colors going on in here. We're basically just going to be messing with the red and the yellow. So if I bring the red down a little bit, it kind of brings down my shadows a little bit. My yellows will kind of pump up my highlights. If I come down, give it a little bit more contrast. Bump that up a touch. Just make sure again that I'm not clipping and losing anything, which I'm not. And come down, give it a little bit of clarity. I always like to bump up the clarity around the 15 to 25 mark, depending on what I'm doing with my images. That should be good there. And then I'm just gonna come in, I'm just gonna bring down my shadows a little bit in here. And that just, as you can see, just kind of drops down a touch and just gives a really nice transition from those highlights to shadows. Now, if I come and I give you my before and the after, here, I'll just do it this way so you can see. We'll go slider. So after, before, after, before. Super easy, super clean. If you get the light right out of the gate, it makes color grading and all that type of thing just ridiculously easy. Now, the last thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bring the crop in a little bit on this just because it is a little more off-centered than I'd like, probably right around in there. And boom, that's all we're going to do to this in Capture One. Now I'm gonna pop this over into Photoshop real quick, clean things up a tiny bit, and just get it ready for the final export. And so here we are in Photoshop, and there's just a couple of quick things that I'm going to do this image. Now, the first thing I'm gonna do is pull this up full size, and I'm just gonna come in and just little things here, like just some little creases. I'm just gonna take my healing brush and just get rid of those quick. There's a couple of little spots on the backdrop and on the bra here. And just clean up anything that's, you know, really sort of noticeable, that kind of thing. Cool, and once we got that, I'm gonna go in, I'm just gonna do a little bit of a dodge and a burn. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm just gonna select my dodge and burn action. Again, this is free. I'll link it down below. It works with all versions of Photoshop as far as I know. You just click on that and opens up your dodge and burn. I'm gonna select my dodge here and I'm gonna come over to my brush tool. I'm gonna make sure it's set to white so that the mask is actually painting away. And I'm gonna set my flow to around 5%. And what that allows me to do is actually just brush it in rather than giving it the full force right off the bat. So if I come in here, come in full size, and I'm just going to even out just a few of the skin variations. Again, there's not a lot to do to this image, but if I show you a little bit before and after, it doesn't look like I'm doing much now, but if I just show you here real quick after smoothing out just a few of these darker areas, if I turn this on and off, you can see that it starts to just smooth out the skin a little bit, kind of get rid of just little variances that happen naturally with our bodies and blood flowing through and everything like that. So go through, I would just clean up some of this stuff, you know, even out the elbows, that kind of thing. I'm not gonna go heavy into it because you guys don't need to sit here and watch me do this for the next 10 minutes, but just to give you an idea of what it would be, again, just before and after, just lightens things up a little bit. So if I came down, flatten that out, and then again, just run it one more time. I'm gonna come in now And I'm just going to come in and start to burn in a little bit just around some of the areas on the image that are already darker. And again, I'm not changing the image, I'm just enhancing it. This is dodging and burning, things that you would do if you were in a dark room. So just gonna add a little bit more to the jawline and the cheek here. A little bit under here. And then I'm gonna come with my dodge, and again, just on the highlight areas, just gonna bump that up a touch just to make them pop a little bit more. Onto the cheek area again, on the lips. I'm just gonna smooth this little area out here. Perfect. And again, so you can just see there, it's not doing a ton, but it is making just the areas, the little bits of interest in the image are just starting to pop just a little bit more. If that's before and then after, before and then after. And as you can see there, boom, that's pretty much it. There isn't a whole lot to do to this image. And that's it for this episode of How I Got the Shot. Now, hopefully you guys gleaned a couple of things from this that you can use in your shoots going forward. If you have any questions about anything, use the comments box down below. That's what it's there for. If you did like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't yet subscribed already, please do. I'd very much appreciate it. And I'll see you guys again very, very soon. Cheers.